Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, a place to find connection and a sense of belonging, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we talk about sensitivity and the richness that it adds, the strengths we have because of our sensitivity, and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there, to the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers. This is a packed episode that I think you're really going to enjoy. Today I'm interviewing Jadzia Jagiellowicz. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her, but in this episode we talk about the relationship between depression and highly sensitive people. She answers the question of why can't I stop thinking about negative things over and over. She's a researcher. She talks about 3 types of sensitive people. She talks about our need to figure out how to best use the strengths that we have and to figure out who we are and knowing our strengths, especially in the workplace. She talks about every HSP is different, metacognition, that we think about thinking. We talk about, is there a link between being socially awkward and being a deep thinker? She talks about environmental sensitivity and temperament and some of the research that's been done with infants. It's really a very, very rich and in-depth episode. I really think you're going to enjoy it. We did record this during the 5th week of COVID shelter in place, and so we do talk specifically about some examples that we're both experienced and how this relates to being highly sensitive, and if we've had negative experiences, how we navigate this stuff. So there's a part of me that thinks if somebody's listening to this 20 years in the future and you're wondering, what the heck was COVID-19? It's actually kind of a novel thought to think about somebody wondering what it is, because it's just in our face right now. If you're enjoying the podcast, I would really appreciate you sharing it with other people. I know we're all in a different routine right now. I've noticed that downloads are down. My guess is that many of you listen while you're going to the gym, while you're dropping your kids off at school, maybe commuting to and from work. We'll just go with the flow. But if you can share it with other people, if you can rate and review it, that would be amazing. Let me tell you a little bit about Jadzia. And this is an abbreviated bio, so if you want to read her full bio, you can go to the show notes at unapologeticallysensitive.com, click on the podcast page, and you can choose this episode, and her full bio is in the show notes. Jadzia completed her Ph.D. in psychology later in life at Stony Brook University in Long Island, New York, under the supervision of Elaine Aron. Dr. Aron was the researcher who discovered the HSP trait in adults. Jadzia has spent the past 15 years as a scientific researcher investigating high sensitivity, also called sensory processing sensitivity, in the scientific literature. She's a temperament psychologist, that is, someone who studies the biological basis of personality, and she's been researching HSPs for 15 years now. She provides individual coaching for HSPs through web-based and phone consultations to clients worldwide, and also conducts scientific research on HSPs, including the first ever research scanning HSPs' brains. She investigates differential susceptibility, sometimes called environmental sensitivity. This is how the biological part of being an HSP interacts with an HSP's childhood and how that affects HSPs as adults. I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. And now, on to the show. Hi, Jadzia. Welcome.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm pleased to be on this show.
Yeah, I'm really happy to have you here. And as usual, we've had our typical 25 minutes of COVID technological issues. So we're just learning to go with the COVID technological flow today. Jadzia, can you tell the listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do so that they kind of get a little framework?
Sure. I actually did my Ph.D. in psychology, studying under Elaine Aron at Stony Brook University. It's a bit of a long story. Prior to that, I worked as a management consultant and then an educator. I got interested in this as an adult and applied and got in. And so basically what I did was I've spent the past 15 years as a scientific researcher investigating high sensitivity. I'm a temperament psychologist, and what that is somebody who studies the biological basis of personality. I've also studied molecular biology, which is a branch of genetics at the graduate level at Smith College in Massachusetts. What I do is I currently conduct research into high sensitivity with collaborators all over the world. And I also provide individual coaching for highly sensitive people. It's web-based and phone consultations. And in my coaching, I like to focus on helping HSPs regulate their bodily sensations and also their emotions. That was kind of my focus when I did my research at graduate school, was focusing on how a highly sensitive person's childhood influences their emotions as an adult. And my interest in my coaching is how to help people regulate those emotions as adults.
Ooh. I know we have a list of questions. We may go a little off topic because I'm really fascinated by what you just said.
Sure.
So we'll see how it goes. Can you talk a little bit about the biological mechanisms, genetics, brain areas, and how they affect sensory processing sensitivity or being a highly sensitive person?
Well, I don't think that's a question that you can talk a little bit about, but I'll try and do my best. Okay, let's start with genetics. I think that's the easier place to start. So far, researchers have discovered two types of genes that are associated with high sensitivity. And one of those genes is the serotonin transporter. And then there's another cluster of genes. They've looked at 10 different dopamine genes. Now, here I'll have to go back and explain a little bit about the methodology of genetic research. There is they can either look at a specific gene and a specific place on a specific gene, or some researchers, and this is the trend now, that they go towards a number of genes, because basically there very rarely is there one gene that's tied to one particular function. So usually it's quite a constellation, quite a big group of genes. This serotonin transporter gene is one of the few genes that has been studied, and it's called a candidate gene. They have studied that individually, and they found that there is a relationship between the serotonin transporter gene and high sensitivity, as well as a relationship between that gene and depression. But what genetic researchers are doing now is that they tend to look more at something called genome-wide association studies. So they look at all the genes in a highly sensitive person, and then they compare those to all the genes in a non-highly sensitive person. And then they get an idea of the genes that are different. And that's considered like a better methodology. We just know that dopamine's related to high sensitivity, and then we know that the serotonin transporter gene is also related to high sensitivity.
So what's the relationship between depression and HSPs if we've got this candidate gene that's the serotonin transporter gene? I mean, I know this is a ton of research. I want a snapshot view of this.
Mm-hmm. There is a relationship between depression and highly sensitive people. Now, what we can't say for sure, and I think this is important, that it's the serotonin transporter gene that does that. We know that there's a relationship between depression and a high sensitivity. Now, what we think is that it's primarily in people who have had poor childhoods. And by poor, I don't mean, because every parent does their best. So I don't want to be denigrating any parents. So by poor, that just means people that didn't know exactly what highly sensitive children need. And that can be a little bit different than other children. I think we can say two things. One, that high sensitivity and depression are related in some highly sensitive individuals. And it's probably more likely that those individuals are going to be those people who had childhoods where whoever was taking care of them wasn't aware of what they needed.
Yeah. What I'd love to do is to see if this is how I've explained it. And I'm not a researcher, so I'd love to mirror this back to you. My experience is that when we don't have parents that understand our traits, we often get that message of you think too much, you worry too much, our caregivers or parents don't understand. And so we internalize the sense that how we show up in the world is not okay. And I think because we tend to be such deep processors and are aware of so much, we often end up with, for lack of a better word, wounding around our traits. And as we do healing work and understand that our parents weren't able to really honor how we show up in the world, help us to manage and regulate our emotions and embrace who we are, as we do that healing, then we can see the strengths that we have and what may be viewed. I mean, depression is on a continuum, so I'm not denying that there's not depression, but my experience is that I have wounding, I've done healing, and often what feels like depression, I think it's just having really big feelings and processing things very deeply and learning how to sit with that. What are your thoughts? I mean, this is a big subject to try and shrink down into one sentence.
Yeah, it is. And I also think, and this is a very interesting philosophical discussion now between sort of two highly sensitive professionals, that each professional area comes at it from their own viewpoint. So I'm going to try and bridge the two areas, if you'll bear with me.
Please.
What I find, because I do both the research and the coaching, what I find is that as highly sensitive people become aware of their biological differences, it really makes them feel a lot better. It's like this huge sigh of relief, like, oh my God, it's not that I'm just so weird or so horrible, or it's like, oh, it's genetic because it is, and it's from birth because it is. The whole field of studying high sensitivity, and it's part of something called environmental sensitivity. And this is a little bit of a transgression, but I think it's important. It started with children. It started in temperament research, which is an area, a field that I work in. People have been doing this since at least the 1950s, studying what they called inhibited children or highly reactive babies. They studied like 6-month-old babies, and 6-month-old babies that were highly sensitive were reacting differently from non-highly sensitive babies. It's genetic, it's early on. If you have it, you are going to be different and you're going to think differently for probably most of your life, or at least you've started out thinking differently. So yes, once people see that, they go, oh, okay, that's why. And then I think it's easier perhaps to look at the type of parenting you had and see whether that's in line with the way that you would like to have been parented, or with your sensitivity. And I think highly sensitive parents notice that because they are much more in tune often with how their children want to be parented. I'm not going to go into the whole area of when they get overwhelmed, but they're certainly in tune because they can kind of remember those feelings, or they still feel them now. So they're much more aware of what their highly sensitive child needs. So we've talked about it being innate. We've talked about the fact that it's a biological difference and that it makes people feel better once they know. In terms of the incredible strengths and gifts, that's another whole interesting area. I think that yes and no, I will say. And I think it really depends on your level of high sensitivity, because if you're looking at what I believe are each strength is useful in a certain environment. Depending on how different you are from the environment that surrounds you, that will change your ability to be able to get along in that environment. And so I think highly sensitive people are very, very good in certain environments. We know now that there are 3 different types of people in terms of their sensitivity. There was a recent study done looking at levels of sensitivity. There are people who are low sensitive and medium sensitive and highly sensitive. It's most probably based on their genetics structure, but for the very highly sensitive people, and that's about 30% of the population, I personally think that some of the real strengths, like being detail-oriented, just that deeper processing, the empathy towards others, those are things that can also cause problems, because if you're very, very highly empathic, then you start seeing the world through other people's eyes, and you forget to sort of stand up for yourself. And here I'm just talking about, I'm talking about the percentage of people that might be, looking for coaching or looking for therapy, looking for counseling services. I'm not talking about, I think there's a big group of people in the middle that are sort of medium sensitive. And I'm not sure that those are the sorts of people that might be coming for help, because those are probably the sorts of people where being detail-oriented allows you to be a great forensic accountant, because or an auditor, because you're looking for the mistakes, or a great detective, or a great journalist. However, if you're so afraid of creating problems with the people you're interviewing, then you're not going to be able to do your job. And if you're too empathic, then you think, gee, maybe I shouldn't ask that question because maybe that's too personal. You can't do that as a detective. So that really detail-oriented, deeper processing, which I'll get into being analytic a little bit later on, could get in the way. And I think when I'm coaching people, this is often what I see. And so I'm making a real distinction between sort of and we're not sure whether this ties in to the level. This is my own personal opinion, that it would be probably your level of high sensitivity, where you score on Elaine Aron's, on the highly sensitive person scale. I think some of the things for the people in the high area, and I'm presuming that those are most of our listeners, for most of those people, I think one of the things that can help is trying to figure out just what parts of those strengths are going to be helpful, and I'm talking about the workplace now, are going to be helpful in their workplace, and what parts of those strengths might not be helpful because they're sort of more than is needed, perhaps, and how they might need to adjust their behavior. I often tell people it's like learning a different culture. It's going to Spain or going to Greece and realizing that people are eating at 9:00 at night because it's too hot to eat at other times. So you may have to adjust that detail orientation and say, okay, I've figured out all the problems in that could get in the way, with this marketing campaign. But my bosses only want to know the most important ones because we can't focus on all of them. So you have to remember you're dealing with a different population of people, because otherwise you're going to get burned out. And that's the way to becoming overwhelmed, is keeping all those details and forgetting that you have a different audience, that you're in Spain now or you're in Greece now. And if you try to order a dinner at 5:00, there won't be a place open for you. I think that's a lot of you're having to figure out sort of how the other half lives and how to best use those strengths to allow you to contribute to where you are.
Got it.
I'm talking about work, but I presume that would be, that would really be the same with a relationship or with your family. Know what your strengths are, and then know when those strengths are needed and how much of those strengths are needed, I think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling torn because we're talking about all these things that we didn't plan on talking about. And
that's all right.
we started out with a list of questions. So I'm trying to decide.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you, you provided some amazing questions for me. So I'd like to help, kind of co-create this episode with you. Do you want to drop back to some of the questions that we had planned on talking about?
What I'm going to do? I'm going to do exactly what I recommended other people do. I'm going to look at the questions and prioritize. And the way that I provided these questions, but what I did was I basically looked at what you, our listeners, are looking for. So I looked at a number of Facebook groups and what types of questions highly sensitive people were asking.
And what I would love is if we can give listeners some tangible, because some of the questions that you gave are things that I hear people asking all the time. So if we can give people some tangible ways to work with the traits that they struggle with, parts of the trait that they struggle with, that would be great.
And that's my area. Oh, and this is a big one. Yes. This is one I just kept seeing over and over again. It's why can't I stop thinking about negative things over and over again? And then there's another question, is there anything I can do to stop the negative thinking? And yes, well, why you can't stop thinking about things in general over and over again. There's an area of the brain called the default mode network. When we did our brain scanning, think that this may be what is showing up over and above other things that are showing up. The default mode network is generally the area of the brain that's supposed to be on when you're thinking about nothing else. Like when you're daydreaming, when you're sitting in traffic and there's just a list of things going through your brain. It's involved in sort of being aware in the present moment, taking in present moment sensations. It's always on. Now, again, I always give this proviso because we haven't actually studied the default mode network specifically in highly sensitive people. So I can't say to you, yes, highly sensitive people have a more active default mode network. However, there's a suggestion that this part of the brain may be constantly on. The other part is that highly sensitive people, and this we know for sure, they are constantly taking in details from their environment. We have at least 3 studies now, brain scanning studies that show that, and they're processing it more. So basically what they're doing is they're taking the information, you're taking the information from all your senses, you're combining that together with information that you've already stored in your memory. You're combining that with information from your stomach. If your stomach is tense and you don't know whether that's because you've just eaten something or whether you're worried about something or you're even excited about your upcoming wedding, who knows? But it's combining all that information. So you've got more coming in and you're combining more with what's already been stored. So as I talk about it, you can already see that you've got all this stuff going on. So that's why can't I stop thinking? Now, why can't I stop thinking about negative things? That, I believe, is linked to your past history. And there's a phenomenal book and a phenomenal researcher. The book is called The Emotional Brain. It's Lisa Feldman, Feldman, Barrett, Barrett. And she has an excellent YouTube video. She'll kind of give you an idea to why you can't stop thinking about the negative things. This is going to be a bit of a long explanation. However, the negative things are coming from your past. I'm going to start right back at babyhood. If a baby has never been exposed to something, for example, highly sensitive babies, these jack-in-the-boxes, as something jumps out of a box, okay? They've never been exposed to that, and it scares them. They're afraid. Their body stores, and your body has stored from a very early age, things that make you afraid. And it stored it in your body. It stored it in your tenseness of your stomach. It stored it in the tenseness of your muscles in your neck. It stored it in a muscular way and in your visceral organs. And that's the first thing your body stores before you can even think of a thought or an emotion. And if you listen to Lisa Feldman Barrett, she describes that really well. When you approach something that reminds you of this, say, for example, I don't know, that horror movie where you had that clown in it, the one that was out recently. I know a lot of highly sensitive people don't like horror movies. You go to that, and your brain already has in your muscles, in your stomach, a stored memory. So as soon as it sees that, before you even know why you don't like this, your stomach tenses because it's that memory. Your muscles tense. And then your brain gives it a meaning. And I'm going to give an example to show you how the meaning can change. So for example, now you're an adult, and this is a totally different example, but you're called in to your boss's office. And we have two different people, okay? One person has been used to going in. She's done pretty well. She's figured it out. So she's used to being called in to, brainstorm about something or being told something has gone well or she's getting a promotion or something. The other person has been called into the boss's office and it's often been negative. So you have these two different people and the boss opens her door she sees an email to come to the boss's office. First person sees the email. Okay. And immediately, this is the person who's had the positive experience. Her body has this calming response. It's like, oh, maybe we won this. Maybe I won this such and such contract. I'm being sent to San Diego to the sales conference where they're going to give me an award and a lot of money. So that's what's going through her head, and she's calm as she goes in there. And then her emotion is one of pleasant anticipation. Okay. You noticed the thoughts that I said. She's thinking, oh, gee, maybe I get to go to the sales conference and, a big award and all that. And it's translated into, oh, pleasant anticipation. All of that happened because her body has this relaxed sensation. Now, the second person sees the same email. The email just says, could you please come to my office at 10 a.m. today? The second one, her body, before she thinks anything, her body is tensing up. And then she thinks, oh my gosh, oh no, like, am I in trouble? What did I do? She's scanning all the reports she's done, all the figures she sent in. Did she get somebody mad at her? All this is going through her head. By the time, before she's even walked into that office, she's afraid. Here we go. This is why these negative things, because she's had a background of negative things that have gotten stored in her body and then gotten interpreted as specific thoughts and gotten interpreted as specific emotions. If you've had experiences in your past, and especially if they've been chronic experiences, ones that are repeating over and over again. For highly sensitive people, they don't even have to repeat that many times because we store things in memory because we have really strong emotions about things. So those negative things are already stored. And by the time we're adults, we've already stored those negative interpretations because we store them as a package. And actually what they found, research has found with depressed people, not with highly sensitive specifically, but with depressed people, and we know that some highly sensitive people are depressed or predisposed to depression. When they retrieve, if you give them sort of a negative word, they will retrieve other negative events from this category. It appears they have in their memory called negative events. And if you give someone else a negative word in a certain category, they will also retrieve the positive words from that category. So it seems like people who are more predisposed to depression will put all the negative things together. Once you have sort of one negative thing kind of predisposing you to interpret a situation negatively, it can be easy to keep interpreting it that way. And now I'm going to go into a whole other area, but it is linked to this.
May I ask you a quick question
sure
first,
can.
just as I'm taking notes? So those folks that also retrieved positive words when given a negative word, what group of folks did those people fall under?
Those were just non-depressed. Yeah.
Okay.
So this was not a study about high sensitivity, but it shows how people that are negative will bring up more negative things, Yeah.
Gotcha.
That's where the negative part comes in. Now, this is where the highly sensitive part comes in. Highly sensitive people are more affected by whatever environment they're in. So they don't have to go through a lot of negative experiences before that becomes sort of the prevailing mindset. Yeah.
Okay. And I was smiling when you were talking about that. I can't remember how many times somebody says, I need to talk to you. And my first thought is like, oh no, I'm in trouble. And I've had to remind myself, like, I'm 56 years old. If anybody's going to yell at me today, it's not okay. And that's a lot of the work that I do with clients. And when I have twin boys that will be 20 next month. And when they started driving, we told them, if you get into a car accident and you call us, you need to say, I got into an accident and I'm okay. And my one son called once and he went into this long-winded story, and my husband and I are on pins and needles, like, are you okay? Is the car okay? Like, we need that information right off the bat that you're okay, because I think it's not uncommon that we go to the worst case scenario, because we're great troubleshooters and predictors also. But like you said, that's just where we go.
That's right.
If people do tend to go to that negative place, what can they do to help manage that?
Yeah. I think there are two things. One is talking back to those negative thoughts. That's what takes their emotions into that negative place, is the negative thoughts. And oftentimes they're not aware of what those thoughts are. Trying to pinpoint what those thoughts are and then talking back to them. And I'll go into that a little bit more detail. And also trying to calm down those bodily sensations. I think it's really sort of a two-pronged approach, but I think it's difficult sometimes for people who are in real distress to do both of those things to the level that they need to be done at in order to get rid of the distress. And this is where, again, I'm talking to all you listeners out there, just stay with it. I mean, it seems so overwhelming and so difficult, and like it will never change. But what I often say to people, and you're in California, but anyone who is in a northern climate will know about shoveling snow. So it's either like shoveling snow or shoveling wet sand. First, you can dislodge maybe some of the snowflakes or some of the sand particles, but then you're going to get to a piece that's like either really wet sand and it'll come off as a whole piece, or the same thing with snow. You'll break a big hunk off. And that's what happens if you stay with it. I mean, it could take, months, it could take years. Also, just keep praising yourself for what you're doing, because don't look at what you haven't accomplished. Look at what you have accomplished. And this is what I try and help people with when I work with them in the coaching. I really do recommend that people listen to Lisa Feldman Barrett, because it will show them how the body and the brain are so connected. I'm going to just give a specific example of sort of talking back to those thoughts. So what I like to do with people is get them to kind of write down what their thoughts are and what their feelings are, after a bad situation, and it can be something very tiny, like, in COVID, waiting in line. So it's not often just those little things that build up, right? So writing down what those feelings are, what those bodily sensations are, what those thoughts are. And then, for example, one of the talkbacks that I'll propose is, well, it's what you said to me, that, you're 56 years old, and if somebody says something now, that's not okay. Well, one of them is, that was then, this is now. And some of them sound hokey, and there are things that are going to resonate with everyone. Another one is, don't make your own predictions. You really don't know. Or another one is possibilities, not probabilities. Because possibilities, like all sorts of things could possibly happen, but how likely is it? Possibilities, not probabilities. Just think about it logically. And that's often very, very difficult to do if your body is complaining. And so that's why I like to add the bodily part to it. And I think everyone needs to seek out what works for them. What works for them in terms of coaching, in terms of therapy, in terms of bodily therapies. With the bodily therapies, I mean, there are just so many things, from, the emotional freedom technique to EMDR to meditation to Tai Chi. And again, I think the level of intensity is going to depend on how highly sensitive you are. Maybe you need a meditation class once a week, or you benefit from a meditation class once a week. Or perhaps you would benefit more from, working with a specialist in a particular area. But I think sometimes when people start to try and help themselves, it's difficult to do it all. Pick one thing, pick a bodily therapy, or pick an area where you can talk back and try and change your thoughts. And do that for a while. And don't worry if it's not working. It's like trying to get rid of a huge pile of sand. You're only going to be able to shift grains at the beginning until all of a sudden, it's going to build to a level that all of it will change at once. It's like that paradigm shift they talk about in business. I think that is really the key, the changing the thoughts. Once the thoughts change, the emotions will change, because the emotions are coming from your thoughts.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so important to be able to have people that we can talk to that we trust, and to talk about what goes on, because that's what slows down the process. I think that we experience something and we get so emotionally over aroused and overstimulated that we just know it feels yucky. But when we can, and I've given this example so many times during COVID, I was trying to think of a better example. I walk my dog a couple times a day, and that's generally a restorative time for me, because I love being out in nature. I love being out with my dog. It's springtime. It's beautiful. I find myself getting incredibly agitated and hypervigilant when I walk these days, because I see somebody down the street and I'm wondering, are they going to move out of the way? I go through this whole analysis of, they don't have a dog. I have a dog. My dog is blind. They should go in the street. Are they not going to go in the street? I mean, I haven't said it, but because I'm getting so agitated, I've considered saying, like, unless you need to pee or poop on the grass, would you be willing to go out in the street? Because that's why I'm out walking my dog. Like, I mean, you can hear, like, I'm pretty agitated, and I've taken walks, and a couple times I've had to say to people, like, maybe next time, can you consider going out in the street since I'm walking my dog? Like, I'm pretty worked up about this. And if nothing else, just talking about it, knowing that walks may not be super calming for me right now, because we're negotiating space, and it's impacting what my perceived sense of safety is with people getting within 6 feet of me, and my sense of who should be moving based on if they have kids or a stroller or all of those kinds of things.
That's so interesting. That is so interesting, because I want to refer to the term analysis, and I want to refer to my example of Spain. Okay, 2 things. Highly sensitive people and slowing down, which we didn't talk about previously, but I think that's important. Okay, yes. What a super example. Just a super example.
I'm glad my agitation and irritation can be helpful to others.
came through so well because this is exactly what's happening to all of us, I think. And I think it's because, and this is going to be our saving grace as well, because we're analytical. So we have all these things going through our heads, okay? And as soon as we process, like as soon as the observation has come in, oh, I'm presuming they're on your side or something, and they're coming near you, and you want them to go out into the street, correct? Okay.
Yep.
Right. Okay. Like, so what's happening is you notice it, your body's tensing up, and you notice, oh my goodness. Okay. Danger. And then you start the analysis, and it's the analysis that is going to help you in the final straw, I think. But the analysis and the judgment, because we're judging based on what we would do. Oh, I would go out in the street. So when is that person going out in the street? Why aren't they going out in the street? How rude that they're not going out in the street. What we have to remember, and it really depends, I think, like how well we do this, I think depends on our innate level of sensitivity and how well either our parents trained us or we were able to sort of train ourselves. We have to remember, again, and I hate to say this because, then you feel like an alien in your own land, but we are oftentimes in a foreign country. These people, I had the same incident in a grocery store the other day, and I'm sticking out my arm and going, that's 3 feet, and you're not 6 feet away. And then I noticed that the store's aisles weren't even as wide as what I thought were 6 feet, because probably I have the feeling my arm is actually longer than 3 feet. And so I had to remind myself that, look, the people in the store, and they were getting really angry with me and upset with me, like the managers of the store probably have actually measured it out. Yes, now maybe that person's a little bit closer and am I okay with that? But most of the people, they were where they were told to be on those little feet symbols, that we have now at least in our stores. Okay, they're doing, what they think is right. And I'm freaking out because they're not, 2 arm widths and I have long arms. So maybe that's my long arm problem, right? It's maybe not their issue. So I have to keep reminding myself that most people are not processing as much detail or having it go danger as we are. Because scientific research does show that most people are more attuned to negative stimuli than positive stimuli. And that's just because as humans, we have to stay alive. So we have to be more aware of negative things. But most people are not as hyper aware of all the danger. Most people aren't as vigilant. That's the key word. Vigilant is what we're born with. We're born with being vigilant. So anything new is all of a sudden, hey, maybe, is it good? Is it bad? We have to be really careful.
HSPs are born with that vigilance, or everybody?
HSPs, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. More so, yeah. HSPs are born with that vigilance. That's what they're doing every time they come across something new. COVID is a whole new situation. So it's like we're really trying to get more information. But the problem becomes when we take that information and combine it and we just see it from our own viewpoint. Because we're overwhelmed. If we weren't overwhelmed, we would see the poor older person and try to help them with their groceries or whatever. But as soon as those danger signs are so strong for us. So I think the first thing we need to do, and I'm going to give a personal example because this just, and I hope that the grocery store I walked out of won't track me down. Okay, I go into a grocery store. I have a family member who has all the risk factors for COVID, including lung disease. So I'm all suited up. I go in there and I have an issue with the staff because I'm sure that the people in the lineup that I'm about to join aren't standing 6 feet away because they're not 2 arm lengths away. lots of other things happen. I'm really getting worked up. Finally, I decide just to leave, slowing down. You have to slow down, because I knew that by the time the manager got to me, I would be just screaming things at him. So then I went into my corner store. And again, I'm going for something, and I've got my gloves on, I've got my mask on, I'm doing everything I can. And this young girl approaches me and she's washing the floor, no mask, maybe gloves, I don't know. And she doesn't see me. And she keeps coming and coming and coming. And finally I say, excuse me, may I get into this section? And she's nice as can be. Then I really slowed down, because I thought, she really didn't see me. It's not that she just kept coming at me to try and infect me. She really didn't see me. And then we started talking, and it turns out that she has 2 family members at home that are at risk, but she has to work. And then all my empathy came out, and, I was back to being nice, highly sensitive person again, but I needed to slow down. I needed to leave that space that was just so overwhelming, and people kept walking past me in an aisle, and then I was going the wrong way. They had these signs that you're supposed to walk a certain way. And then when I was asking for information, they thought I was criticizing them. So it just spiraled. And as soon as I got out of there, and as soon as I said to myself, and my thought wasn't like, when I got into the little store, because of this altercation, I thought, I can't do this again. My thought was not, oh, she's trying to, like, she doesn't care. She doesn't care. I thought, well, maybe she, for some reason, she just doesn't see me. I didn't say, stay away, get away. I just said, nicely. And she was so sweet. And then that sort of stopped the thought, that stopped the judgment, that she doesn't care. And then we could have this conversation. And she talked about how, she wasn't wearing the mask because it was cutting into her face. And I thought, oh, these poor people who really are having to work. And just stopping those thoughts helps. Just talking back to those thoughts helps so much. Yeah. And that's where the slowing down, and that's where the bodily sensations come in. So I think if you can slow yourself down, and I think in a way the COVID virus is helping for certain people, because at least the part of having to transport yourself somewhere is lessened. So some of the things.
Yeah, the thing that I'm seeing where I would love to see this carry forward is for the HSPs that I talk to. Normally we have these thoughts like, am I making a big deal out of this? Is my perception right? But when it comes down to potentially a life and death situation, we're taking ourselves more seriously because the risks are higher. And I would love to see people really start to take that trust that if you're feeling or needing something, that your thoughts and feelings are valuable, even if we're not talking about a life and death situation. And because many of us are kind of on our last nerve, we're unfollowing, we're unfriending, we have less room for behavior that we normally tolerate that we probably shouldn't be. And so the people that I'm working with are setting more limits, they're setting more boundaries, they're being much more clear about what works for them, because again, we just don't have the tolerance that we normally do. And I would love to see this part of how we're responding carried through, because we do need to learn to set limits and boundaries and honor what we need. And I see that as being a positive outcome. And the way that people are really reaching out and connecting, that we know that we need more connection. And I think we have such many of us have resistance to not wanting to feel needy, not wanting to need help. And we're wired for connection. I mean, I love that Brene Brown is saying this over and over, thinking that that will validate it, that we need people, we need connection. That's what we're wired for.
Oh boy, that's a lot of stuff to think about. And I think it, again, I guess I'm talking sort of from a coaching perspective here. And that's just a certain, proportion. I think that would be the 30% or maybe even less than that of the highly sensitive people. So you talked about being wired for connection, and you talked about setting boundaries. Yeah.
Honoring the feelings that are coming up.
Honoring feelings. Yeah. I am wondering whether the setting boundaries and the honoring feelings honoring feelings would lead to the setting boundaries, might lead to some of the slowing down. And by slowing down, it's not just physically doing less, but having less coming in to bother us. So it's always that balance, right? And I think it's going to be different for every highly sensitive person, because that's the other thing I wanted to make sure I said in this talk was every highly sensitive person is different. It's like dogs, they're all dogs, but each one of them, if you've ever had a dog or even approached a dog on the sidewalks, they're all different. So each highly sensitive person is going to have to decide for themselves how much they can deal with, where to draw that boundary. And I think that's going to depend on their priorities. And know that, there's nothing for free. So I work a lot. And sometimes I realize, now I want to play, but there's nobody to play with because, I've been working so much for the past, I know when I was doing my dissertation, I was working so much. Now, fortunately, most of my friends were other graduate students, but I was working so much, I wouldn't return a phone call for a week. And I often can still do that because I'm used to that. But friends of mine now are just like, if you don't return something, within a few hours, that's kind of bad and that's kind of rude. So you have to know what environment are you in? How important is it to you to fit into that environment, or kind of figure out what the consequences of doing what you need or want to be doing are going to be? Are you willing to accept those consequences? And if you are, then go ahead and do what you're doing. And if you're not, and realize, because most of us are doing the things we're doing, so that we can get by and get better. We just have to keep remembering that we're not in a completely sealed bubble, that there's an environment of people out there, and that every action of ours is going to have another reaction. And I think when people start the whole process, I think it's really about honoring the feelings and setting the boundaries, because people haven't been allowed to do that. Yeah, people haven't been allowed to do that. And so I'm not talking to, I think it's important to say that I'm not talking to the people who are really, really in distress. I'm talking about, realizing that there are going to be pushbacks or whatever. I'm talking to people that have gone through that a little bit. And that's why I'm saying every highly sensitive person is different. And I think they're more different from each other than non-highly sensitive people, because every highly sensitive person is more affected by their own specific environment than a non-highly sensitive person. So you have to remember what works for you may not work for the highly sensitive person next to you, because your environment was different.
If you're okay, may I ask you one more question and then we'll wrap it up?
Of course.
And I just want to keep talking for forever. So one of the questions is there a link between being socially awkward and being a deep thinker?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one, because there doesn't necessarily have to be. But I do think, again, every highly sensitive person is different, and a lot depends on your personal environment. The social awkwardness certainly would depend on your personal environment, because social awkwardness is sort of, I think what the person was referring to is sort of social anxiety. So being worried about how you're going to be perceived. If the way you were wasn't accepted by your early environment, by your parents, or by the little social circle, by your peer group, and if your parents weren't able to make you feel better about how you were different, or if they were very concerned about you being accepted by this particular group, then you could have it in your mind that, if I'm not accepted, then there's something really wrong with me. I know somebody who's, I think, quite highly sensitive, and they're a deep thinker. Okay, so you can be a deep thinker and not be socially awkward. That's what I'm trying to say. The social awkwardness comes from being afraid of other people. actually there's a lot of research showing that that's where the interaction between being highly sensitive and your environment comes in. And there's like a lot of good research on this. We actually did some research with something called the Parental Bonding Inventory. And that takes adults and looks back at how they think they've been parented. And there are two things that are not good, and one is over intrusiveness in parenting, and the other one was neglect. So they're kind of the opposite ends of the spectrum, but you could be a very warm parent, but you could just be very intrusive. And so then your highly sensitive child won't have the ability to go out in the world and make those social connections. Or if you're neglected, then, obviously that's going to be bad too. But so if you're a deep thinker, it's not the deep thinking. The deep thinking makes you different. The social awkwardness comes from not understanding or not accepting your differences and not having ever learned how to control your own emotions, and then how to navigate in an environment of other people.
Jadzia, thank you so much for this talk today. I'm really excited about all this information. My brain is still kind of filtering all this stuff. So thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's really been a pleasure and a joy, and I felt like a real connection with another highly sensitive person who's also trying to help, the highly sensitive world out there. And it's interesting how we often do feel the same way about things.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Have a great day. Hey again. So what'd you think of the episode? This is probably one of those episodes to listen to more than once, and the show notes should be incredibly detailed because I took at least 4 pages of notes while we were talking. If you resonated with some of the things that Jadzia was talking about, she provides coaching. I also provide coaching and therapy to people in California. The online HSP courses are going to be starting again. That's also kind of a great place that if you've got some areas where you struggle and you haven't really had a chance to be around other HSPs in a warm, nurturing, supportive environment, the feedback that I've gotten from people who have taken the course is really positive, and that sometimes these people have not really been in a group of other HSPs in just an environment where they really feel seen and heard. If you're interested in working with me, you want to know more about the online HSP courses, you can go to unapologeticallysensitive.com. There's the HSP groups page to get information. All the other information that you need is there. All the work I do is online. It's global. You can work from the comfort of your own home, or we can meet online from the comfort of your own home. We have a closed Facebook group called Unapologetically Sensitive. There's a great community in there. There's lots of resources for social media on my website. I really appreciate each and every one of you. My hope is that as you learn more about your trait, you really can see the strengths that we have and really see what a gift we have to offer the world, which is why I do this podcast. I really don't want people to feel alone. I know I felt like there was something really wrong with me. How I showed up in the world just wasn't okay. The more I talk about the trait and interview people and learn about myself, I really do. I just feel like I've changed. My life has changed. That's my wish for everybody, that life is going to have struggles in it. We also have lots of joys. But as Jadzia said, as we learn that this is just a genetic trait, we really can embrace the gifts and strengths that we have. So my hope is that's where you're at. And if you're struggling, reach out to me, reach out to Jadzia, find an HS knowledgeable therapist or coach. We do better with therapy and coaching than the non-HSPs. Our outcomes are better. So it's all good news for us. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's our superpower. Have a blessed day.